Last week I talked about my old series Torchquest and how it all fell apart. It mostly just lowered down to the script didn't come together. And there's a dozen reasons why the script didn't come together. But there was one really big one that I didn't learn about until after I started really doing research. And it all starts with the fact that the Olympic torch relay is a very modern invention. If you ask somebody, hey, why do we do the Olympic torch relay? Their answer is probably going to be, well, they did it in ancient Greece and we're continuing that tradition. But they're wrong. The ancient Greek Olympics did not have a torch relay as part of their opening ceremonies. Ancient Greece did have torch races. They were called lampadophoria, but they didn't really operate the same way that we think of them, and they weren't for the same purpose. Please understand that I am not a scholar of ancient Greece. I'm just somebody who did a lot of reading, and if you are an academic who studies ancient Greece, please feel free to correct me here. But my understanding is that the lampadophoria was a race where runners were each given a torch, and your goal was to get to the finish line as quickly as possible without the flame going out. If your flame went out while you were running, you were disqualified even if you got to the end first.
Like a Charmander.
They did also have a relay variant of the lampadophoria, but you didn't pass the flame between runners. Instead, you had to physically pass the entire torch, because the goal was to get the torch to the finish line. And what's really important here is that neither variant of this race was used as part of the opening ceremonies for the Olympics in ancient Greece. At least no record of that happening has ever been discovered, to my knowledge. I'm throwing all these qualifiers in here because I am not an academic. I cannot stress that enough. We started lighting the cauldron in Amsterdam in 1928, and I understand that ancient Greece did have a ritual fire element to it, so the cauldron has some basis in history, but the relay element, that was started by the Nazis. This was one issue with the script, but it certainly wasn't the only issue. That being said, it was a noticeably large issue that we had to work around. I tried to work out a script wherein we could tell a nuanced story about how my character was really passionate about being a part of the torch relay, but then they discover the origins and they have to grapple with figuring out whether or not participating in the relay meant they were perpetuating Nazi propaganda, or whether we were making it something that was our own. We were trying to wrestle with the conflicting ideals that the torch relay ostensibly stands for peace, but it does come from these origins, and how weird it is that nobody knows about these origins, despite them being the whole reason it exists. But ultimately, what I had the hardest time wrestling with was the nature of YouTube. The way people watch things on YouTube doesn't really lend itself to serialized storytelling in that way. It would be very easy for somebody to find one of the earlier episodes that doesn't grapple with this, and then never find the later episode that does grapple with it. And it seemed to me like that would have the opposite of the intended effect. We would end up accidentally celebrating something that I intended to criticize. And I really didn't want to be involved in the casual ignorance of history that I kept seeing from my sources. So I really couldn't find a way to make this all come together in a way that I felt was nuanced and satisfying, while still grappling with some of the bigger ideas. The person who's most often credited with originating the torch relay was a man named Karl Diem. It's worth mentioning that Diem himself was not directly a member of the Nazi Party, but he did work with them, and it was at the very least complicit in their government. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that in March of 1945, Diem gave a speech at the Berlin Olympic Stadium in front of thousands of Hitler Youth. Diem demanded that the Hitler Youth show Spartan-like spirit because they needed to be unafraid to die for their country. And quite frankly, I don't really know if it matters whether or not he was technically a member of the Nazi Party. I feel like when you're trying to get thousands of teenagers to die for Nazi Germany, you don't really get nuance, you know? And the thing is, it wasn't just that the torch relay was invented by the Nazis. It was also utilized as a form of Nazi propaganda. When the torch came through Vienna, Austrian Nazis began singing the Nazi Party anthem and throwing anti-Semitic slurs at Jewish members of their own Olympic team. And it's worth mentioning that Hitler initially didn't want to host the Berlin Olympics in 1936, but he decided to move forward with it when Goebbels convinced him that the Olympics could serve as propaganda. Hitler even ordered Nazi Party researchers to find as many links between ancient Greece and the Aryan race as humanly possible. They love pretending that they're the latest in a long line of ancient traditions. That's the basis for nearly all of their propaganda. And if they have to make up an ancient tradition just to pretend that they're a part of it, they will. Plus, they love that it could be used as like a show of strength. Look at how we can run a lot, I guess. The torches themselves were made by Krupp, which was a German arms manufacturer. Leni Riefenstahl filmed it to become part of a propaganda film. Then she reshot it with a different guy because she didn't think the actual runner was white enough. It's weird that I didn't know about this until I got deep into researching. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Olympics is trying to, cover up its origins, because they haven't lied about it. I haven't really seen anyone lying about the origins, but I have definitely seen a lot of sources casually ignore it. This is an old article from the Washington Post. It's a press release from the Atlantic Committee for the Olympic Games. And here's what they say. Conceived by Dr. Carl Diem of Germany, the modern torch relay was inspired by ancient Greek drawings and writings of Plutarch. Diem created the first relay from Olympia to Berlin as part of the opening ceremony of the 1936 Olympic Games. See, they mention Carl Diem, but your average person doesn't know who Carl Diem is. And they don't really know the circumstances under which he was creating these, or how it was utilized at the time, which seems like really relevant information. I also found this from Expat Athens. Conceived by Dr. Carl Diem of Germany, the modern torch relay drew inspiration from ancient Greek depictions and writings of Plutarch. Dr. Diem's vision materialized in the form of the first relay stretching from Olympia to Berlin as part of the grand opening ceremony of the 1936 Olympic Games. No one mentions this. It's like they're trying to hide it or something. Since its revival, the Olympic torch relay has paid homage to its Greek roots. How about this? This is the official Olympics website. What do they have to say about the history? A modern invention inspired by practices from ancient Greece, the Olympic torch relay heralds the start of the Olympic Games and transmits a message of peace and friendship along its route. First used at the 1936 Berlin Summer Olympics, the modern torches of Summer and Winter Olympics are built to resist the effects of wind and rain as they carry the Olympic flame, and bear unique designs that represent the host country and the spirit of the Games. That's literally it. I will hand it to them. They do say it's a modern invention that is inspired by ancient Greece. If you're continuing a tradition that was started by some of the most infamously evil people in history, don't you kind of owe it to people to tell them that's what you're doing? Now, I can understand an argument that we still do the torch relay as a means of taking it away from the Nazis. The Berlin Olympics was held in 1936, and then they canceled the next few because I actually don't know why. I guess everybody was just busy. Then when they started back up again for the 1948 London Olympics, they brought the torch relay back with it. Keep in mind, this wasn't an established tradition. They had only done this literally once before. And that relay is often nicknamed the Relay of Peace. And I can understand that, right? I mean, you can get that visual. Coming together to say we can move forward. And I want to bring attention to two very relevant quotes. The first is from Gina Hemphill-Strachan, who is Jesse Owens' granddaughter. If you don't know, Jesse Owens participated in the 1936 Berlin Olympics, where he won 4 gold medals. As a black American who became the single most successful athlete at the Games, he basically gave Hitler a gigantic fuck you on his own turf. There was a 2-hour and 15-minute long movie made about him in the mid-2010s. And according to his granddaughter, to me, the torch relay kind of says everything about the Olympics. It had a difficult beginning and turned into something great and wonderful. The second is from Luke Zamperini, the son of Louis Zamperini. Zamperini also participated in the 1936 Olympics. He later enlisted in the Air Force and was taken as a prisoner of war during World War II. In his life, he ran with the Olympic torch in 3 different relays. There was a 2-hour and 15-minute long movie made about him in the mid-2010s. And when his son Luke was asked about the torch relay, he said, "I actually feel fine about it." And look, I have absolutely no right to tell Jesse Owens or Louis Zamperini or their families how to feel about the torch relay, and I'm not trying to. But here's the thing. It seems like if we're doing the torch relay so that we can take it away from the Nazis, why does the average person not know that that's the case? I don't think your symbol really works when no one knows what you're symbolizing. I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying the torch relay. If you do enjoy it, I don't think that makes you a Nazi. I don't think that means that you personally are perpetuating Nazi propaganda. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to still run with the Olympic torch. But I do think that the Olympics has a responsibility to keep its fans informed. And to continue doing the Olympic torch relay to a largely uninformed populace is irresponsible. Because if this is an attempt to stick it to fascists, I'm all for that, but you can't stick it to fascists by simply adopting their traditions without any comment. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you have to explain to somebody why we still do the Olympic torch relay, Do not tell them that it's because it's an ancient tradition. Tell them that the Nazis did it so that they could pretend they were superior to everyone else, and then we proved them wrong. Now we do it to remember that we are stronger together, and that a diverse society is always going to be healthier than a fascist ethno-state. Or we could just not do it anymore, that might be easier.